On the build show today, we're gonna show you how to take this 50-year-old nasty slab from this
to this. Wait, why do I look different?
All right, guys, we got a fun video for you. We're gonna take you through all the steps to go from this nasty 50-year-old slab to what you saw earlier. But I got an expert with me, someone you may know already, a fellow YouTuber, Erik Cortina. Erik,
how you doing,
thanks for
man?
joining me, brother.
So, yeah, what is this, 50 years old?
Yeah, this is a 70s house, 70s slab.
Yeah.
It's looking pretty ugly, Erik. I don't know, man. This kind of scares me thinking about putting a coating on top of a floor like this.
Well, for being 50 years old, it actually looks really, really good. And you have options, right? Everything we do on my channel is mainly new construction, but this concrete is really not a good candidate for stained concrete because stained concrete, the color is in the concrete,
okay,
and then we simply put a clear coat over it to protect the stain.
Yep.
But every stain, anything that's on here is going to show. So I think you're a better candidate for either epoxy or polyurethane or some coating that has the color in the coating itself, not in the concrete. That way.
So the coating is going to be on top then, and you wouldn't see all the nastiness underneath.
Correct. Now we're still going to prep it. Don't get me wrong. We're going to have to grind it. Typically, if you're doing stain, you don't want to grind because you need that cream on the surface. Mm-hmm. You know, you just need to profile it a little bit, just enough to get the sealer to stick.
Okay.
But you want the cream on the surface because that's what's going to stain.
Yeah.
All right. Here, we're not worried about it. We're going to grind it. Grinding is going to be the easiest, fastest, best way to get the profile that we need for that coating to stick. You want that coating to stick. Okay, so preparation is key, as you can imagine.
And speaking of prep, before you got here today, you gave me some directions. Talk me through what Andrew and I did yesterday in terms of general prep.
Right, so obviously, being 50 years old, you're gonna have oil stains, you're gonna have stuff that just has fallen on the concrete over 50 years. And so you guys use some daily clean. Just get you a good cleaner that can, you want to get as much off of that concrete as possible. Yep. You're not going to get it all, but you want to get as much off as possible. You want to get a floor machine with a brush, a stiff bristle brush. That's what you want. Oftentimes you can use a pad, but I'm not
even better.
I'm not a big fan of the pad because the pad just kind of floats on the surface, and you want to profile the concrete. And whenever you profile it, and then you use that chemical, you want to get it out. So if you use just a pad or a brush, you want to vacuum the water afterwards, okay? Again, here it's not as critical because we're going to grind it. Right now, you were just getting kind of the stuff off the surface, which you did a good job. I mean,
thank you.
But even then, there's still a lot of stuff behind. You know, there's a lot of paint. There's
we're seeing some garbage on the surface that didn't come out.
Well,
and we've got some of this kind of stuff happening too, right?
Right, and we're going to fix all that. And that's the beauty of doing a coating, right? If we were just simply staining the concrete, you could not really do anything to that because if you patch it, that patch is going to stain differently than the old 50-year-old concrete.
Right, whereas a coating is going to float over top of all that.
The color is in the coating itself.
And if you patch this, my assumption is you're going to patch first and then you'll grind to kind of feather that patch out so you won't be able to see
That's why I wanted you to clean it up. Now that it's clean, I can go straight to patching. Okay. After we get it patched up, we let it cure for a few days, maybe about a week or so. Make sure that concrete or that patch, we're actually going to be using a micro topping. And you want that to be well and cured so that when we grind it, it grinds nice and flat with the rest of the concrete.
Got it. Eric, I've got a pretty big defect over here. Are you worried at all about this guy? This was my old HVAC closet on the house before. Believe it or not, I was in the garage, which is a terrible place for an HVAC system. And that is the Freon lines that were running through a sleeve in the slab. What do we do about that?
Oh, that's not a problem. So what we're going to do, we're going to have to fill it in with maybe some foam or something.
Okay.
And then we'll grind it flat, and then we'll put some of that concrete that I have, put it down in the hole, trowel it flat, fix this spot as well.
Yep.
And then we just leave it alone.
And it's not in a traffic area, so it's not that big a deal probably.
Right, but it's not going to look that good today. And that you just want enough build so that when we grind it, that it grinds flat. Don't worry too much about troweling it super flat. Typically what happens if you try to trowel it super flat, if you get it perfectly flat and there's any shrinkage, it's actually going to suck down, and you don't want that.
You're
So
gonna
you
see
want,
that.
correct, you want a little more than you need. So right now, it's going to be very simple. We're just mainly going to look at all the areas that are bad. You know, you have some spots back here.
Yep.
All that needs to be fixed. So we're just going to fix the main stuff. It's not going to look super good today. It's going to look really good after we grind it. After we grind it, then we put the coating down.
All right. So let's come back here in a couple of days once we've gotten some dry time, and then we'll show you the grind process, right?
Exactly.
All right. Okay guys, day 2 of work. We let the garage dry. What's up with today's work, Eric?
Well, we started grinding the floors. We need to profile the floors so that the epoxy can stick really, really good.
Okay.
Typically on new construction, as I said before, we can simply do an acid wash. But because this, what is this, 50 years old?
Yeah, it's from the 70s.
Right, and I did some patchwork, then grinding was the best solution.
And talk to me about that grinder. That's a more industrial grinder. What's the grit of pad? What are they using to actually grind?
So that is a 30 grit. You can actually get down to about a 14 grit.
Is that right?
And
Rough.
but yeah, so the thing is, I had no idea what kind of concrete they use here. You know, they could have used like a 2500.
Yeah, who knows?
You never know, right?
Yep.
So I didn't want to bring the 14 grit because I was afraid they would do too much damage.
Yeah.
Whereas the 30, if it doesn't do enough, well, then you just do multiple passes, right?
Makes sense.
And then you'll get there.
And now that we're done, you can kind of see what you've got here. It has a little bit of a swirl pattern in some of the harder spots.
Right.
In the softer spots, you got more sanding done. Is that right?
Yeah, so it profiled the slab really well, and now that's going to provide a really good surface for the epoxy to stick to.
Yeah, it's kind of toothing in, right?
Correct. You know,
Okay.
you have all those hills and valleys. That's just more surface area.
Makes sense. What's the next after this now?
Well, now we're going to finish cleaning it up really well. As you know, today we did not use water because the epoxy, you cannot have moisture.
Yeah,
And
no
we're trying to
moisture
get it
mess
done
up.
today. So what we did is we just did it all dry. We vacuumed all the dust. And now we're going to clean it out real well. We're probably going to take a leaf blower. Have to wear a mask. This stuff is bad stuff. So blow it all out. And then after that, then we can start putting down the epoxy and the chips.
All right, I'll meet you back when we get the epoxy started. All right, the excitement begins. Leroy got our part A, part B of the crown polymers all mixed. Talk us through what you got going on, Eric.
All right,
there
so
it
we got the
is.
epoxy mixed, and now we're gonna put it down. The thing about epoxy, it is 100% solids, so you don't want to dip and roll. You want to pour it right onto the concrete, and you want to use a notched squeegee
A notched squeezy.
Yep.
Interesting.
to spread it around. It's only got about these are 1/16 notches on this thing, and this is going to allow us to spread it evenly on the concrete, and then we're just simply gonna come back with a roller and roll right over.
Okay.
If you dip and roll, again, because it is 100% solids, it's not going to spread really well, and you may actually get roller marks, especially if it's
Got
a
it.
very hot day. So you want to use the notch squeegee. And this is literally all you do. Don't be scared.
I'm a little scared.
All right? You do that.
One little puddle to start with,
Yep.
and then he's
Push her
going to
out.
kind of work it into all the places, isn't he?
See that?
And that 1/8 inch or 16th notch, it's not a lot of notch, but it's allowing some material to flow through and get a kind of a
Consistent cover.
consistent
That's
coat.
what
There you
you're
go.
looking for. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Like I said, the roller's going to do the rest. But
Probably a good time for us to mention that Eric wanted to do this work prior to sheetrock, which makes sense because now we're not super worried about taping walls, being perfectly careful about edges. And that also means that I've got a little bit of forgiveness built into the system because once the sheetrock goes on the walls and I put base down, I've got about an inch and 1/8, or inch and 1/4, let's say, from that zip sheathing or from our studs to the final wall, so that that edge where he's epoxying out here doesn't need to be perfectly up against something, which ultimately is going to save us a fair amount of time in the end, right, Eric?
correct. So you want to work smart, obviously.
Wow, a little epoxy goes a long ways.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the beauty about the squeegee as well. You can get very even coverage. Go ahead,
This looks
Leroy.
awesome.
Now Leroy can start cross rolling.
Crush rolling?
Cross.
Cross rolling. Sorry, misheard you. Okay, now what's the type of roller pad he's
So
using
we
on
are
there?
using a 3/8 roller.
Okay.
3/8 roller. Obviously, you want a non-shed nap. You don't want it to shed.
Yeah, if it sheds, it's going to be there.
Yeah, you want it to be a solvent-based or solvent-resistant roller. So it has to be a quality roller.
Yep.
That's the bottom line.
And this gray epoxy that we're using here, Eric, could be a final coat if we wanted to, right?
Correct. But we are going to use this in order to get our chips to stick. So we're going to put it down, then we're going to come back and throw chips on here.
And with those chips, do we also need sand in there for slip resistance, or will the chips do that for us?
The chips is going to give you a surface. It's not going to be very slippery. Plus, this is interior. I don't like using sand if we don't have to, because it makes it really hard to clean.
Yep.
But no, the chips will give you plenty surface.
One thing I've got a question for you while you're doing this. You've got just a small crack in that slab right there. Will that epoxy cover that?
It will to some degree, but the chips
Are going to really do it?
Really bring it home.
Got it. So when you're doing this, it's not perfectly level. Leroy's really doing the more final level with the roller.
This is just so you can spread it.
Yeah.
The main reason for the squeegee is so that you don't leave it too thick.
Yep, makes sense. What's our pot life?
It's not much. Today's a beautiful day, so it's
Low humidity. Not super hot.
About 75 degrees. So our pot life right now is probably about 30 minutes.
Okay.
But you want to maintain a wet edge at all times.
Yeah, you got to keep moving.
That is, you have to, not only do you have to keep moving, you have to keep mixing. And you can't mix more than one kit at a time, so you have to time it properly.
And one kit is a gallon and probably a quart of part B,
It's a
something
gallon
like
and a
that?
half. The mixer's 2 to 1.
Okay, 2 to 1.
So it's 1
So it's a
gallon.
half gallon of part B and a gallon of part A
Correct.
from this particular Crown Polymers. That
Correct.
may be slightly different depending on the manufacturer you end up
Correct.
using.
And you do want a 2-part.
I also want to mention that this is not an epoxy we're buying at the home center, the hardware store. This is from a pros store that would sell to individuals if you're watching this. But generally speaking, this is a pro type of install. Man, this looks so good. I can't wait to see those chips go down. So are we worried about doing chips partial now while the epoxy's still wet, Eric? Or are we going to do the whole garage and then throw
We're
chips?
going to work our way back. So when we get to about here, we're going to throw chips on here.
Got it.
And then just keep working our way. You can always come back with spiked shoes. However, I do find it easier to throw chips down as you go, because if it's a big job and you wait until the end, it may get too dry on you, so the chips will no longer stick. So
Yep.
you have to be extremely careful about that as well.
Got it.
You can see Leroy doing the face right there.
Okay, yeah, so that curb tire stop is getting done right now by Leroy as he works his way down. I'm also noticing that Leroy's got a good amount of epoxy to work with. There's not an excess in there. There's no big puddles. There's a few parts like this that have just a little bit of a ridge of epoxy, so to speak. But other than that, no big puddles, no big drips.
Yeah, and that's the squeegee. That's what the squeegee does.
Yep. Looking really good, guys. One thing I want to mention is when my epoxy is complete, in these corners down here, I'm going to put a piece of Sega tape or zip tape between the zip sheathing and the base, and the floor. And then eventually I'll put a PVC base on like Versatech, and I'll probably also caulk that to the floor so that if I'm ever power washing my garage out or hosing it out, I'll make sure that I don't get any water and also air or bugs underneath my bottom plate. This is a remodel situation, so I don't have a concrete curb for these walls. Chip time, guys. So anything special about the chips we need to know, Eric?
Nope. Just...
That's it.
That's it.
It's like man glitter.
There you go. Wow.
That's cool.
So this is all you do.
Throw them out.
Now, obviously, you can decide how much you want to do. I mean, you could say, you know what, that looks good. Just leave it alone. And that's the reason for using the colored epoxy. That you don't have to do 100% if you don't want to. You can literally just leave it like that if you like it.
I do kind of like that.
Okay. Well,
I don't know that it needs to be
all right.
1000% full.
We can do that.
I'm looking for a camo epoxy so that it kind of camouflages all the dirt and all the junk.
Okay. So, I mean, you can see that's fairly easy.
That is pretty easy. Look at that. Because it's wet, it's sticking really nicely.
Yep.
Yes, Eric, this is looking good, man.
Like it, huh?
What's our time? What did this take us? Maybe
once it was prepped, an hour.
Yeah, not long at all. And how many gallons of part A, part B do we end up using?
So we ended up using 3 kits, which is 4.5 gallons total.
Yeah, 1.5 gallons per kit.
Right.
And we got just enough, or do we have a little bit extra?
We got some left.
Man, this looks awesome. So he's doing the final roll here, and then we'll chip throw this. And then what else for today? That's it for today, right?
Let it dry. Let it sit up.
And then we'll come back tomorrow and do the final step.
Tomorrow we'll pick up the excess chips and we'll clean it all up and put a coat of clear to protect the chips.
Yeah, baby.
That's
all
it.
right. Okay, guys, it's been a day. Mr. Eric and I are back.
Howdy.
Let's check it out. Floor's looking good, y'all. However, one thing Eric and I didn't think of is we had a couple leaves kind of blow in overnight. What do we do about that, Eric? Do I now have a chip and leaf floor rather than just a chip floor?
Chip and leaf. No, this is fine because I'm going to scrape the surface anyway.
Yep.
This is not a problem.
And
Also, it's probably going to blow off with the leaf blower.
Let's try it. Let's
By
see
the
what
way,
happens.
if you don't have one of these, get you one. This
Milwaukee makes a
absolutely
killer leaf
I have one
blower.
of these. It's amazing.
Agreed. Now look, this one's stuck.
Yeah,
but once you kick it,
Yeah, see?
it's pretty much gone. Yep.
Now, the problem will be if this happens after the clear coat is on, because
Right.
then they're there forever. So we're gonna have to do something here to protect.
Yep. Get
the
some
second
plastic
coat.
up and get this this big opening kind of sealed off.
Right. But other than that, I mean, it's looking great. I mean, this is a nice finish.
That chip looks awesome.
Yeah.
And there's still some loose chips in here. So
Yeah.
you mentioned scraping and blowing. What's that process look like?
Well, the chips, as you know, we threw some down, and of course some land on top of others. That's excess chips. So those we're gonna blow off, and then when the chips fall into the epoxy, some of them, they don't all fall flat. So we're gonna scrape the surface to make sure that we have the thinnest chip layer as possible. Then we're gonna come back with a clear coat, and then that's gonna protect the chips and protect the floor overall. So it's gonna look great.
Okay, so Andrew and Erik came up with a great idea. Some just cheap poly, and then a couple of small tools, and we're gonna keep those leaves from blowing in onto my clear coat. Because actually, in one or two places, once we got the leaves out, we actually left a leaf impression in the epoxy, which I think we'll be able to fix and no one will ever see, but we certainly don't want those falling into the clear coat. So 10 by 100 sheets, we're gonna run that across the top. I got some really good duct tape. This is probably much nicer than what I should be using, but this is what I had on the job. This is good stuff. Keep this T-Rex tape handy for all kinds of stuff. So I'll T-Rex tape it to the brick on the side, and then everybody needs one of these bad boys, my little arrow stapler to staple up. Super easy to make an airtight opening now, and we will continue with the clear coat process. Erik and Andrew did a great job of getting a plastic on there so we wouldn't have leaves blown in. And Eric, talk to me about this this top coat that we're doing today.
So this is a polyurethane, Crown Polymers, I think it's 8110. And this is a protective coat. Most people don't realize, but polyurethane is actually more scratch resistant than epoxy. So that's why we're doing this. So this is gonna protect your floors and your color chips. If later down the road, if for whatever reason your floor gets damaged, the surface gets scratches, you can come in, scuff it up, put another coat of clear.
Got it.
And then it'll be a brand new floor again.
How different is this from a polyurethane you might use on a hardwood floor?
It's quite, actually, to be honest with you, I don't know.
Okay.
This is,
It's a cousin at least.
yeah, poly is poly, right?
Yeah.
But they're built different.
Yep. So this is really just a mix in the bucket and then roll out with a roller.
Right.
And this time we worked our way out of the room opposite to what we did before, because we started on this end and worked our way back, and we're going to be really cautious not to get anything on that top coat. That's why we've plasticked. We'll shut the door here. We'll shut the door into the house. We'll put some signs up, don't come in. But then I think I talked about this yesterday. I'm going to put Ramboard on top of this, and then I'm going to let the sheetrockers sheetrock this space. We'll go through construction, and that Ramboard will protect this floor underneath. And that gave us the ability to do things like this. You know, we got a little bit of, you know, for lack of a better term, slop up on the sides. We didn't have to pay attention to that quite as much because I've got sheetrock, and I'm actually considering putting some AC plywood on these walls after sheetrock, and maybe even some wood on the ceiling after sheetrock to make a really nice, pretty finished garage. This is where Eric works his way out of the space right here. And he's basically this little corner right here hasn't been done yet. We're going to work our way out of the door, and then we're going to shut that door behind us and let it hopefully dry overnight, untouched.
This is the critical part because you're putting clear on color, and it's especially here, not a whole lot of light. It's really hard to tell towards the end the parts that you have missed.
Yep.
And tomorrow it is extremely obvious where you missed. Today is not so much.
That's right. And that's where if we ended up with a second coat, you could fix those sins if we had any of those errors.
Right.
Eric, this floor turned out money. I absolutely love it, dude.
I'm glad you like it. Like I told you, this is the perfect way to dress up an old slab.
Yeah.
You cannot tell that there's a 50-year-old slab under here.
And speaking of which, Eric, if you remember from the before, I had a giant hole there because this is my HVAC closet.
Right.
And for my OG fans out there, you remember when there was a bunch of mold, there was this huge, nasty, moldy spot right here. The concrete looked terrible. You filled that hole, we epoxied it. Now this polyurethane's dry. It looks amazing, dude.
Well, that's the trick, right? It's what you know.
The other thing I wanted to mention too, Eric, is this was your kind of recommendation to put these flakes on. I was thinking go all gray epoxy when we first started talking about this, and you said, you know, these flakes are really smart because they kind of camouflage the dirt, they hide all the flaws.
Right.
And you're totally right, man. This garage floor is not flat, it's not perfect, but your eye sees this kind of one big mottled look.
Correct.
And it's kind of like almost like texture for sheetrock, right?
Correct.
You don't see the imperfections.
Correct. So if we had done single colored high gloss, it's
would
extremely
have to be
hard.
perfect.
It's extremely. We would have to grind it extremely flat.
Yep.
And even then, you could probably still see it.
Yeah.
So this is why I love the chip floors, because they hide so much and they look great. I mean, they look amazing. They also have enough grip that you don't need to put a sand coat down.
Yep.
So it's a very good system
It doesn't feel slippery at all.
for a DIY person. I mean, and as far as the chips, as you saw, we just throw chips on
Throw
it.
it out. And it was kind of a 4-day process, if you remember. Now, it's a long video, I realize, but we had basically 2 days of prep, a day to epoxy, and a day to polyurethane.
Right.
And we mentioned this already. I'm going to cover this with Ramboard. We're going to move on in construction. Talk to me about if I wanted to do a final coat, if I had some scuffing, that sort of thing.
Right. So, as you know, you're going to cover it up, but construction, there's always the possibility that somebody's going to put a scratch on it. So, at that point, if you do want to recoat it, all you have to do is come in with about 100 grit sanding screen, 120, and just go over the whole floor, scuff it up, and then just put another coat of clear. and you're done.
Done. Love it.
Simple.
Erik, you're awesome, dude. Really appreciate it. Guys, if you're not familiar with Erik, I know him from Texas Barndominiums, but you may know him with his whole other life, his whole other career. He's a professional shooter, and he's got a killer channel on that and a really cool Patreon page for kind of really insider tips on that. So I'll put a link to all of Erik's info in his Instagram feed as well. Anything else I mentioned on plugging for you, Erik?
No, man, you're good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thanks for joining us for this long video, but a lot of good stuff here. Stay tuned for a future video. I got a couple really interesting plans for this garage to really make it sing. So look for that future video. You know what a nerd I am about the details. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.